We had over 1,200 cyclists come to town and tour Tehachapi. We grew by 150 riders this year. Also, I want to thank the City Public Works for all the help that they gave us, helping the stage and just, getting everything ready on Thursday so our staff could set everything up on Saturday. Also, the city staff, working with us with their special use application and just making sure that everything was smooth and we had all of our bases covered. And with that, we had the riders, we had them from all over the country. The farthest came from Florida. We had people come from Texas, from Oregon. I had an email today, a guy said it was so worth driving 2,000 miles to come to Tehachapi. It was just amazing. The emails are just flooding in right now. Our Facebook page, we had a great video posted, and it's got thousands of views and hundreds of likes, and just our ride is really taking hold in California and the United States, and I'm just so appreciative of our partnership with the city of Tehachapi, and thank you guys.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Carl Garrick. I live in the city. I've lived in the city for 41 years. I have never seen such a reception or all four of you guys on our city. I went to a planning commission today. Yeah, 2 people show up. They couldn't hold the commission. 2 people showed up the last time. They couldn't hold the commission. Now, there's a poor man who wants to develop his building in downtown Tehachapi. Can he? No. 2 of you people voted against every single person other than one who wanted to be on the planning commission. All 4 of those people who applied for the planning commission were well qualified. But yet we want to do our little power play. And we're going to show how much power we have. You did not fill the planning commission. Nor did you fill the other 2 city council meetings. No, we're going to do our power play. I think it's time for our power play to be over. You 4 people have got to talk to one another. You can't just go on your own damn way. It's time to bury the hatchet and talk to one another. And let's get this city going again, because it's not going. I'm going to do my little power. Power's over with, guys. If you don't know it, hear from the rest of the people in this city. It's not my little power. No. It's time for you 4 of the people to get together, like any other board of consideration in this valley. The planning commission can't do too much because you guys are flat. Park and Rec, they have disagreements between them boards, but they get it together. The hospital district has their little difference, but they work together as a team. And that's not what you are doing. I've had my say.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, then we'll move on to item 7, Airport Manager Report.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council Member. As you know, at the last meeting, we tabled an agreement between the city and Bruce Glenn to further assess possible locations proposed by staff for 2 T hangars at the airport. We evaluated the proposed areas from the last meeting and also found 6 alternate locations. They've all been evaluated by the Development Services Director, also our airport engineer, and they've been ranked by location, accessibility, and amount of capital it would take to develop the area, among other things. So Corey, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the map. So as you can see here, we have the locations from the last meeting, 1 and 2, which are in red. And then we have a few alternate locations, A, B, C, and D, which are here. And on the next map, we have E and F. We've also included on this map for you as you can see there, the future building restriction line. So we have to follow that. It looks, as you can see, there's hangars built beyond that. So that was our old restriction line, but with the parallel taxiway moving, our restriction line now is further back. So if you go back up to the other map there. So we had our top 2 locations initially were DMV. I've also added C to that as one of our top locations after getting the assessment by our airport engineer. All three of the locations are located on the southwest side of the airport, also referred to as the commercial way property. The hangars would be flush with the adjacent hangars, and would not be an issue for taxiing aircraft, as was the concern with hangar 2 there that we were looking at. I want to note that we did not include any hangars on the Bimbo property, as that's a prime location. It's a great spot at the center of the airport, a great location for potential box hangars, business, and so forth out there. These are T hangars, so the thought is to be able to fit these in somewhere where potentially a box hanger would not be able to go. We did receive a few calls today. It sounds like a few tenants were called a little upset. Once we got to talking about everything and the what we proposed, he understood a little better. We're okay with everything. The only thing I wanted to make sure and bring up was one of the tenants mentioned that D, being on that small little park there, was actually built by, or at least in part by her husband, which was Dave Swigel. And she just was hoping that the council might be swayed a little bit to maybe go with B and C rather than D. More so because that was a momentum for her children and everything. So anyhow, our recommendation is that you choose either B, C, or D. Those are all seen as viable by our airport engineer. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Questions from the audience?
Sally Melville, I live out in Bear Valley, but I have, my son, I have a hangar on the airport. I would like a written assurance from the city that the septic tank that is attached to hangar B will not at any time, in my lifetime anyway, covered. Because those hangars look, that hangar looks like it's right slap bang up against their hangar. And there also has to be, I want an assurance in writing from you guys, and I will pound you till I get it, that equipment can get in there to empty that tank. I don't really have an objection to the hangars. I think it's crappy that they're T-box hangars because it doesn't suit that area, but I'm not gonna fight that one, but I want to be sure that that septic tank, I've paid the encroachment fee, I've done my due diligence on this, so I want something from you guys in writing that it will never be covered.
May I,
Yes.
may I speak to, I have a
Can't hear you.
kind of, question. I don't have any records of where that septic tank is. So do you have construction records?
Go talk to your city people, because I had to pay for an encroachment fee when somebody drove over the hangar and the septic tank and damaged it.
Correct, that only
So, and
identifies
I
for,
asked for a copy of the permit and was never given it. So
because I don't believe there is a permit for it.
go back in your records, I don't have a permit. We bought the hangar in
Okay.
2007, it was built in 2004.
Okay.
And they made me to do the repair. They
Yeah.
made me go through and pay all permits, et cetera, that I needed.
I understand,
No,
for the
not
repair.
doing it
of it.
again.
Okay, well, I don't, I'll do what I can. I don't know that the city can provide a letter in writing. If it was never permitted initially, and it doesn't sound like this was your fault, you purchased the hangar with a septic tank, then ostensibly the original owner installed the septic tank without a permit. And I know where the lid is because of your prior activities last year. I remember our discussion over the counter. But I don't, without records, I don't know where the extents of the tank are because somebody installed the tank without a permit.
We can show you.
Okay, so you know the boundaries of
I can show
the.
you where
Okay.
the tank is and where the leach field is. I can do
Okay.
that.
Well, then we can, yeah, then I can create a record at that point, and I think we can work on making sure that the T hangers don't land on top of that. It sounds like a hurdle.
We'll look at what
Yeah, we have to take a look at and see what the situation is, but okay, very good. So I think we have your contact information, do we not? Okay, we'll reach out and try to get some information on exactly where those facilities are.
Next question, how much space is between that hangar and our hangar? What is the?
The code will require 5 feet.
5 feet?
Yeah.
It'll actually end up being more than that because there is a fire hydrant between,
Oh.
next to her hangar, which is smaller not.
Okay.
Will we be able to see plans for the hangars? You know, what they look like? Probably idle curiosity, but I would like to see what's gonna be done. right
If
next
you'd like
week.
to stop by, we are working with their engineer,
Okay,
Bruce Glenn's engineer, so he will have plans. We do have some from the prior meeting. We do have photos of the actual T hangers if that's what you are
Will they be
curious.
standing on a concrete base or will they be being put on the dirt or the blacktop?
No, we will have a base for them. We are requiring them to go through the planning department to get all the proper permits and to do this the right way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ken Cummings, 520 Folly Street. Before so many people were even around, some of those hangars on the Bimbles property were moved from the east side for the future of making that home for porta ports where they are right now. I don't understand why you don't put them back where the plan was a few years back and tuck them in like they're designed to do, rather than put them in oddball places alongside $200,000 and $300,000 hangars you put, like putting a Model 8 alongside of a Cadillac. Won't you keep them, instead of scattering around the airport, put them where the rest are, and that's what they're designed for. Can you tell me why you're not doing that?
Corey, if you go to the second map, you said the east side, correct?
Pardon me?
You said the east side?
Where the porta ports are on Bimble's property now,
Oh.
why aren't you putting them there with the rest of them?
Well, if you can see the building restriction line comes down, well, more than halfway past where the current T hangers are.
Go
So you
ahead.
can't build north of that line.
Fine, put them on the south side.
True, but the point being was that it's such a prime location, if somebody wants to come in and build nice box hangers, that is a great location for them to do so. Located right next to a gate, although not operational right now, it's not something we can't bring up to speed on that.
You're doing exactly what we designed, they tried to do years ago, bring them all together, right? Scatter them and hopscotch through the airport. Looks like hell.
Mr. Cummings, you need to direct your comments to me, and I will direct staff to
And you're gonna
comment to
relate to her when you're talking. Why are you putting them there? Madam Mayor? Mayor, walk
I-
out to me. Why are you putting them there?
Listen, we're putting them there because that's what we deemed was best for the airport. And I can have, actually comment on that if you would like.
No, I'd like to have you do it. You're the mayor. Why don't you put them with the rest of them, nested, rather than scattering around the airport?
She's gonna refer that to the
Yes.
airport
So I
manager.
can't talk to her then.
You can talk to her.
You just
and-
did,
and she
now I'm
can-
referring. Do you want your question answered?
Yeah, and you have nothing.
I'm sorry, but I think I've answered the question. I'm not sure what else I can tell you, Mr. Cummings.
Well, why are you scattering them around? Answer me that.
Well, we're trying to save the locations that can be used for possible box hangers. We're able to put them in here and not take away from a location that could be used in the future.
You're creating a hazard by putting the one right there in the corner where those big aircraft come in.
We're not putting one right there. The recommendation is to do B, C, or D. Number 2 there is from last week's, that's why we tabled it and brought you alternate locations, or the council alternate locations.
You need some help, huh?
Good evening, Jim Roberts, I live in the city. The blue line there, you can't build anything north of the blue line, nothing can be north of the blue line. The question is, what's gonna happen to those hangars that are north of the blue line? If you put in another taxiway,
They're fine.
they're fine, okay,
Yes.
so that kind of begs the question, why can't you put at the east end of Benville's property where those T hangars, the rear of those T hangars are, you have room to nestle 2 T hangars between those T hangars that are existing. And still, one will be partly north of the so-called blue line, but the other one will not. And that won't mess up the whole Benville area regarding future box hangars.
We also have to look at the fact that it could cost the builder quite a bit in pavement in an area like that. If you put him over on the commercial way area, he doesn't have quite as much in capital that he has to spend to do so. We're trying to make this as reasonable for the builder as possible.
Jay?
That was gonna be my comment.
Okay, all right.
But you see what I'm saying? Are these gonna be port size hangars, what are these?
Yeah,
kind
so
of
can you
hangars?
see the white executive T hanger there? He's
Yes,
kinda-
yes, I see that.
They're gonna be like that.
Oh, so that's a larger hangar than would fit behind those 2 hangars I'm referring to. Because
Yes.
that's an executive port, that's a larger hangar than a normal
Yeah,
port
just
hangar.
slightly larger, yes.
So it won't fit in that area. Okay, that was my question. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Council?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Having sat in a lot of those discussions with our former airport manager, Dave Zweigel, whose name was mentioned earlier by Ashley, the intent of that entire area was to attract and bring in corporate business aircraft. The sizing of those hangars was specific to that requirement. I think we, I hate to keep going back again and again and again, but I think we really ought to go back again and look at whether or not we can come up with an alternative location. I don't necessarily disagree with what Jim Roberts said as far as nesting those hangars, whether it be a standard T hangar or the white T hangar that's pictured there on the blue line. We can work with that and make that appropriate for the lessee to come in and put those buildings in. The big hangars, again, were dedicated and allocated and designed for big airplanes. And co-mingling and mixing big and little together, we know very clearly what Roger Hayes and Sierra are currently doing. They're going to have in that in building, along with the 2 or 3 other buildings that they're currently in, they're going to have jet aircraft operating. And they're going to have jet aircraft operating potentially at power settings. They're not going to be at takeoff power, but there's going to be power settings that will completely interrupt the structure of a T hangar. Seen it happen before. I think we ought to really go back, and I appreciate what John Smith said from Tartaglia. I think we ought to go back and look at this again. My only concern is it's not a concern. The good thing that we have working in our favor is, like I think Mr. Roberts mentioned, they're porta-ports. If we put them in a location where we ultimately end up having somebody come in the future that says, I want to build a big box structure or an entire new layout in the former Bimbo location, you know what, we can uproot those T hangars and we can move them elsewhere. But I would hate to see us go down the path of jeopardizing something that is currently underway in the form of Sierra by commingling big and little in that particular area.
Jay?
Yeah, can I respond to that on a couple levels? First is development service. I mean, it's my job here at the city to, when somebody comes in and wishes to develop anywhere in town, to help shepherd them through the process and to help, to the degree that I can, deal with how unbusiness friendly California is in general. And I do have to say, like, Mr. Glenn has been very patient and has been working with us for months to try to find a location, go through the process of hiring an engineer to evaluate the quality of those porta-ports to deal with the snow and wind loading that we have here, to address and identify locations on the airport where he can build a concrete foundation and then the apron piece, and to not give him a decision tonight after one continuance and after the months that he's done just is not business friendly in my opinion. So I give you that as my professional advice about, as development director, that to not give him a decision tonight is really not business friendly. Secondly, I need to point out the Benbow property, Ashley made the point, and I think it got kind of dismissed, is we require both a concrete foundation to be poured under the porta-port and a finished surface from the front end of that hangar to a taxiway anywhere that we place it. So most of the locations on the Benbow property would result under that condition, especially if we tuck them in against the other ones, with tens of thousands of dollars of asphalt construction in order to connect those new hangars to an existing asphalt surface, which makes the project totally unfundable from this gentleman's. He's hoping to make a couple $100 a month in rent. That's his plan. So I'm going to move these ports in, I'm going to put in, and so he's willing to amortize some expense, the cost of a foundation and a short apron, but that is why we continue to kind of move away from the Benbow properties, not because we don't see the point that's being brought up here, but because there's no version of that doesn't make the project untenable for the potential builder. Instead, it sure seems to us that finding some of these nooks and crannies on the airport where nothing else can ever be built because it can't fit something else makes a lot of sense for the finances of the airport and for our tenants. The nice thing about porta-ports is they don't have business activities occurring in them during the course of the day. It's literally a place to park your plane that you pull in and out. So it's not like you know, it's moving the bad neighbors in or something like that. Like, these people aren't hanging out on the front porch. So, you know, my vote is yeah, liking these locations or not, that's our recommendation, it's John Smith's recommendation, but I would strongly recommend that as a council, you guys give me 2 locations to give this gentleman today. Whether that's other locations that we haven't identified in this. I mean, Ashley and I spent a bit of time driving around after the last meeting trying to find some locations, but I just, you know, only being the guy that's talking to him on the phone, for me to have to pick up the phone tomorrow and say the council couldn't do it again, you know, it's a hard phone call to make, and it reflects on us as a city. So I would appreciate that consideration.
One more thing for you too, this also provides great opportunities to certain people, plane owners. I have a waiting list that's about 30 deep right now for people that want hangars. This guy's willing to bring up these hangars and he wants to rent them out. And a few people I've kind of mentioned this to are just ecstatic because they want to be at our airport.
Can I, one more question, Ms. Mayor? You mentioned bring these up. Are they previously built and constructed T-hangars?
Yes.
So they're used T-hangers that
They
are
are,
coming
we
up?
did verify, that's why I made him send me pictures so we could verify they were aesthetically pleasing. And then Jay has worked with him and had him hire his own structural engineer to verify they were stable and suitable for to hatch food.
One other comment, Madam Mayor, and I'll be finished. That entire Benbow area that was in question for whether or not aircraft can operate in and out of there with a non-concrete or non-hard surface area. When Lou Vandenberg was alive, and that was Benbow Aviation, and he had about 10 airplanes parked between the big blue hangar and the other T hangars, the 3 that are lined up. That entire area was full of airplanes, and there was never any hesitation on being able to use that surface for taxiing or otherwise. And if Lou was able to make that work, I don't know why we couldn't make it work for somebody else without going through a big, lengthy, expensive process on, you know, pouring asphalt, or either them doing it or the builder doing it. Nevertheless, it's just purely one additional comment on that area having previously been used for aircraft. I have nothing more.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a decision this evening, and Ken, you're the expert on the council. I'd like you to pick a couple of sites that we could kind of agree on. I hate to keep, you know, having this gentleman wait. It's not making us look like we are business friendly in any sense. Are there 2 in there that you could live with?
If I could, I'd like to throw another little mix in here.
Sure.
I have not heard recently what our status is with Hangar 1, the old building. Maybe Mr. Schlosser can provide a little input on what the status of that is. I know that at one point in time, we were planning on leasing it to an individual that had an antique airplane that wanted to put it in there just because of the aesthetic reasons. You know, a period correct airplane and a period correct antique hangar would have been a very neat thing to have at our airport. Nevertheless, I also understand that there was some evaluation work that had been done on that ultimately drove that concept over the cliff. Is there any possibility, and you'll not hear this come out of my mouth very often, is there any possibility that or any reason that could not be looked at, the building, as a structure to be removed and then plug the T hangars in that location?
Yeah.
I mean, if we can no longer as a community or as an airport or as a city use that structure for anything, you know, maybe it'd be donated to, you know, the museum down in Bakersfield. They can plug it in with all their antique structures down there. Something, I mean, that building was built in 1930, so it's got historic value. At the same time, if we can't use it as a city for aviation purposes, well, you know, it gets to a point where we have to make a decision, and that decision is gonna be a hard one.
Yeah, maybe, and I don't know, Greg, if you want to step in on that one, because that was It is my judgment as the city engineer that that building is not fit for occupation, in the sense that we would lease it out and allow somebody, it's not that you can't walk into it, but from a liability perspective, to rent that out, it has been modified from its original construction, and I don't know the quality. We did have a structural engineer look at it, and their answer was kind of one of those, kind of walking away from the situation going, it's a beautiful building, it's really neat inside if you've ever been in, it's got these cool bow trusses, but it needs a full structural evaluation and potentially structural rehabilitation to be brought into use. So to answer your question, I mean, to my knowledge, the council has the power to ask us to demolish that building and reutilize that space. I don't know that there's any law that I'm aware of that would keep us from doing that. That's, as your engineer, I'm recommending that we don't lease that building out as is. So those would kind of be your options. You could ask us to evaluate it and rehab it. I think that's probably more expensive than demoing it. Or you could ask us to demolish it. Greg?
The Heritage League is somewhat interested in the building. However, they don't have a plan and they don't have a budget. But it certainly has some historical value to our airport. If we did demo it, it would cost, $10,000 to $20,000 to demo. And it's a perfect square for a perfect replacement square box hangar. The intent tonight, as Ashley had pointed out, was to just slip in some T-hangers into spaces that could not ever accommodate a full box hangar, staying below or south of the new blue line, if you will, if and when we move the taxiway. So certainly we'd love a decision tonight. We think that we've given you a couple, I think, B and C. I respect Mike and Sally's Melville coming by tonight. The septic tank issue, obviously, we would stay well clear of that. We don't interfere. The last thing you want is somebody to build on top of a septic tank or go to each line or not be able to pump a septic, right? I'm sure there are plenty of houses in this community that have created that problem for themselves or others have created it for them. D is a nice spot too, but we have a grassy little park, and there is, a little memorial. God rest his soul, Dave Zweigel. The problem is, once a hangar is placed, whether it's a T-hangar or a box hangar, it's going to be there forever. We can't put a T-hangar on the Bimbo property and expect to move it at some point. We're going to give this guy a 20-year lease with 2 5-year extensions. It's a 30-year lease. And if we move it, we're going to have to pay to move it. We want to be financially stable. We want to have a plan that's a good plan. Certainly, we could put the T-hangars on the Bimbo property. As Ken pointed out, there have been airplanes there for years coming and going. But really that's, let's say, the Alpha property. If somebody wants to build a complex, as Ashley had mentioned, we have 30 plus people on a list that are looking for a hangar that want to come to our airport because they have a desire to come to Tehachapi. They love our airport, they want to be based here. Ashley and Don Marsh and I last week went to the Association of California Airports Conference, the national annual conference, and we met a gentleman that is a hangar developer. And so we've started some discussions with him about developing hangars. But those things take some time to push through, that's for sure. So we think we've given you some good options. We have backup from our airport engineer. He's recommending that we do so. People taxiing in and out of the commercial way area, they're not going to be taxiing at full speed. They're going to, usually if they're big, they tug in and out. But certainly they could, certainly a jet could taxi through there. I'm not sure I would make that choice myself. Most, if not all, of those hangars are occupied by small general aviation and or businesses at this point. Not to say that, in a couple of years we might be full of jets, who knows? But we're always constricted by the length of our runway. We are who we are, right? That's it. We're not going to be getting heavy iron in here. So we have to understand what's happening short term and long term. And I think B, C, or D they're all good options for you this evening.
Dennis, any way in?
Yeah. Matter of fact, I do like to see this as more contention for everybody. It's a good idea to keep the bimbo area clear for bigger hangars. I can understand where, to me, we're hodgepodging, and I don't like that. Also, if you remember, we had 150 grand that we could have used that could have took down number one, and we didn't do it. That was a mistake for us, not for staff. Staff made a report on it, and we're the ones that decided to do that. I don't want to see the airport, I won't say it, but I'd like to see the airport in a structured way and nice straight lines and things where they should be. For sure, D's gotta be out of the question. I don't know enough about airports and widths for different planes, to make an honest decision on this. It's a frustrator to me.
I'll make a motion that we go with, if there's more comment, I'll.
It's Kim Cox, 520 Polish Street. There's been a lot of talk about developing the north side. If you say, actually it's true, 30 plus people want to come to Paxby and I'm calling you all the time, wouldn't it be a good time to develop the north side? Rather than squeeze them in like you're squeezing them in now?
I highly doubt somebody wanting to put in 2 T hangars is willing to do the infrastructure required for the north side.
Thank you.
Well, you have money to develop, what are you going to do with the people that are calling you, Madam Mayor? What are you going to do with the people that are calling for placement to put hangars? Where are you going to put the 30 people? Do you shut them off?
They have to wait like everybody else. They have to wait for availability.
They're not,
We,
sorry. They're not calling for placement to put hangars. They want to rent hangars.
If you have a developer that someone said they do some hangar developer, wouldn't it be a good time to start thinking about the north side, which has been in the makings a long time ago before your time?
Perhaps, but we have quite a bit of area. As you can see, the Bimbo property, we have area west of Mr. Heckey's hangar, kind of southwest. On our ALP, they're still, ready for hangars to come in there.
So
So we
you
still
have-
have areas south.
You have no intent of developing the north side, is that it?
We still have plenty of room right now on the south side. If somebody would like to come in and develop the north side, absolutely.
Is there a possibility there could be grant money, work on that north side, like it was kind of?
I think at this point, we need to make a decision tonight, one way or another, where to put a few T hangars. Development of the north side has never been tabled, and we will certainly look into that, as we will with hangar developers, and as we will with some of the other questions. But right now, this evening, we either have to say yes or no whether we're gonna put these T hangars there or not.
No, I'm sure you can tuck them in someplace.
So Phil, could I just say one more thing? Just for the record, going back and reviewing what was said earlier about the cost involved in moving those T hangars. I can tell you that Jim Roberts and I moved the T hangar that's just to the right of the little white hangar on the blue line, all the way from where the Green Street gate is down to its current location in one afternoon with my forklift. So there's not really a whole lot of work that it takes to move one of those porta-ports. So keeping that in mind, if we do decide to plug those into a Bimbo location, they can very, very easily be moved with a forklift and a couple of guys. I mean, it's not a drastic, it's not like moving a box hanger that's been anchored down with 4-foot deep footings. It's a whole different thing, and they call them porta-ports for a reason. They're portable.
They're literally trailer portable. Sorry, we got too many mics on here. But that That statement, though, requires one giant presumption, which is the place you're moving it to has a foundation that works. And we're limited on those because of the new build line. Again, if you look at those, all these finished asphalt surfaces where we might be able to move a porta-port to are now, when we move this building restriction line as associated with the taxiway relocation, all of that land kind of disappears as available land. And so Mr. Glenn is proposing, part of his permit is a new 6-inch thick concrete pad, the apron that goes out in front of it, structural seismic anchoring. Also something that I might note probably didn't get done when you moved that hangar is proper anchoring to keep it in a major windstorm from blowing away. Or maybe
It is anchored.
So you used structural engineer told you how to anchor it?
Well, I'm not sure about that. We use Dave's Weigel.
Okay. Well, Dave often had plans for things like that. Anyway, the building code requires a structural engineer to make that call, and so that's what Mr. Glenn is up against. And so I respect where you're coming from, but I just, again, that no build restriction line, which is why we plotted it on here, is changing this game a little bit for us. And new hangars have to go in with proper foundations, and that's just our future now.
The other point that's worth mentioning on that, Jay, is that entire area coming around from where the office is to that one particular hangar, that was never asphalted or had any formal, it had literally a spray coat over the top of the dirt.
Yeah.
And it's lasted successfully for a long time. I know that there were some things that flaked up here 3 or 4 or 5 months ago that had to be repaired. But nevertheless, with a porta-port, it's a whole different issue, and it creates a little bit of ease for people that either own it or may have to move it. And that's the only point that I need to make, because it is worth noting.
If I'm the person putting that on there, putting on a slab, and then doing that though, they're gonna be really irritated if we ask them to move it. So, how many spots do you need out of the, we need two. I'm gonna make a motion that we go with B and C. They are.
Wait, hold your
Oh, I'm
motion.
sure.
One more trouble.
That's okay.
I respectfully.
Quickly.
Yes.
Quickly? No, you're serving pizza. I'm just Can't listening say to you all like. this oh, geez, my voice is loud enough. I'm listening to a lot of this conversation, and I'm starting to think, we paid a lot of money for our hangar, and we're gonna have these little tea hangars next to us, and we are elders. Some point, it's in the distant future, but at some point, we're gonna want to sell our hangar to whoever. Is it gonna be devalued because we have these rinky-dink, I'm sorry, you can call me whatever you want, I don't care. But we've got these hangars that don't fit in with that area. It's just a question, something to think
Well,
about.
let me ask you the reverse then. If it was you and you wanted to sell a hangar, would that, in your mind, devalue your hangar?
Yes, it would.
But
I didn't pay the kind of money I paid for that hangar to have a tin, and it is not a tin shack, I'm just using that
Sure,
as a,
okay,
next
Thank
to
you.
me.
thank you.
So yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's let the discussion go on a little bit longer and think out of the box a little bit. Now, right across from if we did put them in the Bimlows area, Jay, what's the minimum specifications for the ground floor for one of those trailer containers?
Wait, so what's the minimum foundation?
Yeah.
It's, what they're providing, about, 6 inches of concrete, may or may not need to be reinforced, I haven't taken a look at it, but it has to have a permanent foundation, and it has to be permanently anchored, and the structural engineer is making recommendations about the floor and the anchoring. That's the basis of my statement.
Yeah, Dennis, could I interject, Jay, thanks. I don't think that's correct. Those porta-ports are specifically meant to be portable. Those porta-ports at the airport, there were only 1 or 2 of those that had permanent foundations that were built when they were originally put in. I completely agree with Jay. They have to be sufficiently anchored to meet the wind requirements. The wind loads, the wind requirements, there's some other seismic, they have to be anchored. But as far as the foundation, those things can be literally put right on the surface. And that's the great thing about a porta-port. They can come in and they can be taken right back out. They're a complete portable building.
Well, my thought is since we're not using Bimbo's property yet, and we don't have anybody that's banging on the door to put a box hanger in there, if we could go with the minimum set down for one of those hangers, for both of those hangers, on Bimbo's property, with a clause in the agreement that if there is a need for those to be moved, that they'll be moved, and we move them at our expense.
Where would you move them to?
Bimbo's property.
No, move them out of Benbrook's property. Are you just delaying that decision? You gotta find another location for them.
That's what I said, that was the issue.
I have a question for Dennis. Would you, as the person that's wanting to do business with us, would you sign something in a clause that says we're gonna give you 2 lots, but you might have to move? Would you be still willing to put in a foundation and I understand that they're gonna need some asphalt work as well? I'm just throwing it out.
I would imagine that, yeah.
You know, Mr. Glenn was contacted in preparation for tonight's meeting to just add yet another wrinkle to this, and his comment to us was a request that he review the potential locations because he cares about where they go from a perspective of caring about the tenants that he can get. And so I suspect parking them, opening onto the dirt will devalue his potential investment, which is why fundamentally the city owns the airport and the city alone decides what land to lease and to whom. That's the nature of you being a lessee on the airport because you're leasing from an owner who gets to decide how they want to develop their airport. So while I'm not suggesting at all that you don't consider the economic impacts to your tenants when you make these decisions, I am saying you're vested fully with the authority to make the decision that's in the best interest of the city, which is to put a good hangar in a good location and make revenue for the airport enterprise fund. I continue, I understand each of the metrics that are here. I understand the objection to sites B and C from an aesthetics perspective and from a potential tenant perspective. I still feel like though that they make the most sense. Simply because it's tidy. That location can never be used for anything other than parking stuff. Ms. Melville pointed out that somebody backed over the lid of her septic tank earlier this year, costing her quite a bit of money to repair it. This would protect against that, because now that spot would no longer be accessible to vehicles. I'm sure we can work through the issue of making sure that hangars don't go atop her tank. I suspect our lease agreement already speaks to the hangars being kept in good repair, an obligation for that purpose. So if that was a concern of the council, that they be kept well painted and clean looking, then that's certainly something you guys should voice to us as staff. But it's 2 T hangers, and we've got a nice clean spot for them. It just feels to me like it's an easy answer. But anyway, that's my recommendation.
I certainly am not a pilot, but I have spent many times at jobs I had, including Edwards Air Force Base, when I had to go on FOD walks when the wind was blowing 45 miles an hour and it was 30 degrees outside because we couldn't have any FOD on the runway for jets. And you have mentioned that there are going to be jets there running and blowing maybe, whatever, and I don't want to park anything in the dirt that's going to pull out on the runway. Maybe airplane tires don't pick up FOD, I don't know. But it just sounds like we live where the wind blows, and the less we can stir up dirt, the better it seems like it would be. But
I'll make a motion for B and C.
it's been moved. Do I have a second?
I'll let this gentleman put some hangers up.
I'll second the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
I'm not opposed, I'm just not informed, and I'm gonna abstain from this.
Motion carries.
No.
The motion carries.
The motion been carried. Thank you very much. All right. Moving on to number 8, Verizon Wireless Airport Cell Tower Lease.
Give me just one moment, I'm trying to write down the minutes here.
Sorry. What happens when you have to multitask?
All right, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem and Council, as you're aware, we've also often held lease agreements with wireless carriers for cell towers at the airport Rockpile. In July of last year, we came to terms with Verizon Wireless for an agreement, and at the request of the council, we tabled the item for review by the FAA, since it was a non-aeronautical use. Soon after, we received a letter. They also reviewed the lease. They requested that we hire a consultant to look at the lease, so we were getting fair market value. We did hire Airwave advisors, and at their recommendations, we received their recommendations in February of 2018. The consultants found that we needed to increase the lease by approximately $250 per month. Originally, we were going to charge $2,000 per month, so it came to $2,250. They also added an initial fee of $5,000 for administrative costs, and they included a 3% annual increase. The changes have all been put into the lease. Any of the revenue generated will go into the airport fund. As you know, the cell towers out there are negligible as far as going to airport operations, so it shouldn't be an issue. We've already got some cell towers up there. I've got the fiscal impact to the airport, as I just said. So the initial fee of $5,000, monthly revenue of $2,250, and which would be an annual revenue of $27,000, which does not include that initial $5,000 fee. So the recommendation is that you approve the agreement between the City of Tehachapi and Fresno MSA Limited Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless, and authorize the Mayor Pro Tem to sign, subject to City Manager and City Attorney approval.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
James Roberts, Living City. I just had a
You gotta
question.
press the speak button on there.
Speak button? Okay, thanks. I had a question on the last vote you folks took. There was a motion made, and the mayor seconded the motion. I don't know if a mayor can second the motion.
Yes, she can. She can make the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions concerning this item? Council?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I only have a couple of just observations in reading the contract. There's no reference in any of the agreement that I could find, and I went through twice. I hope I didn't overlook it, but nevertheless, I couldn't see any reference to the FAA in there, Mr. Schroeder. It is a very, very important issue to have reference to the FAA and to Form 7460, which is a form that is required anytime a structure is built. I see where it does refer back to the lessor, and maybe that is how we're bridging that gap. But yeah, sure, Mr. Schlosser.
I can answer that. It was a condition of the approval of the development through the planning department. So it's covered, but it's not in the lease. It doesn't need to be in the lease, but we will not approve the project till we have that determination.
Okay, let me tell you why it may need to be put in the lease. Because under Section 2 permitted uses, paragraph C, I don't know if you've got that or we can pull that up. There's numerous references in here where the lessee can make changes to the inside or the outside of the building. Those will not be unreasonably withheld. Anytime a change is made to an exterior of a building on an airport, it triggers the requirement for that 7460 to go back. My concern out of the whole document is that paragraph C. And I think that we probably ought to try to protect ourselves a little bit more and make it a condition that if any changes are made, because right now it says lessor's consent shall not be required in some of these. About halfway through the paragraph. I think we ought to just be cautious and we ought to include that in the document that if a change is made by the tenant, that we go back, that the tenant be required to obtain the FAA 7460 form indicating what changes are going to be made.
No, it requires landlord consent in the sentence just before that. It's only if it doesn't modify the exterior that it doesn't take landlord consent.
Thank you, sir.
We didn't hear his response back here.
It
No
does
one
say,
heard him.
it does require landlord consent in the sentence just before.
Additionally, Verizon, my name is Tim Adams, I represent Verizon Wireless. Verizon is required by the FAA to file all appropriate documents, otherwise they risk losing their FCC licenses. So that's something that's very important that they do on every single site, regardless of location. Obviously, it's doubly important here because it's at an airport. So anytime they make modifications of frequencies and things like that, they're required to report that. So additionally, you guys have approval rights within the lease for certain modifications, so that should cover that.
Are you familiar with the 7460 form?
No, I don't file regulatory on behalf of Verizon, but they have folks back east who do. And they do it for every single site. They manage 80,000 cell sites across the country, so they're very familiar with what's required for regulatory.
Okay, this is a little bit unique naturally because it's located on an airport.
Right, and they have other sites, right? So I've put in installations at SFO, Sacramento Airport, etc. So it's not unheard of. It's a little bit unique, yes, but it's not unheard of.
And where's that statement you're talking about?
In paragraph C.
All throughout C, it requires landlord consent, except where it's not going to be a change in the appearance.
Well, Mr. Schroeder, if you're okay with the way the document is written, we will go ahead and proceed. I'm just, as an airport aviation-minded guy, I just need to make sure that we're all on the same page in that 7460. If we can add one sentence that takes care of it, but if you're happy with the way it's written, we can go ahead and proceed.
Okay, I'm happy.
Okay, fantastic, thanks.
Yes.
Hallelujah, we're getting $27,000 a year for the airport fund, I am thrilled. So, AT&T, are they ever doing anything? That'd be another $27,000 a year.
Are you serious, or, no, I know you are.
I'm being facetious, but.
Are you, yeah, AT&T, they're one of the biggest corporations in the world. We wish they would come and put up an additional tower, but we court them. But those of us that have AT&T suffer in silence, literally.
And Verizon's here tonight, so unless there's any other comments, I make a motion to approve the lease on staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Let the record show it was a 4-0 vote. City managers report.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Wiggins. I have Che Johnson here to step up to the podium. We have tonight, and I'll let Che go over the details with you, but I wanted to say thank you to Che with Liebert Cassidy Whitmore, and then our Public Works Union, the Federation of Public Service Employees. I don't think anybody is here this evening, but certainly we've been working through this. And what we have this evening is a 3-year agreement between the City of Tehachapi and the Public Works Union. And I'm very excited about this, and on both sides, it's a win-win for everybody, and we just really appreciate everything that the Public Works Department does to keep our city safe and sound. So Che, I'll let you take over the details.
Thank you very much. Today before you, we're very happy. We were able to reach a very positive agreement with the union, which guarantees 3 years of labor peace with the employees. It also guarantees that if in the event of an economic downturn, the council has the ability to revise the terms of the agreement and meet with the association. So it's built into it protections for the city council. So it guarantees long-term stability and flexibility for the city if we need that. The key terms of the agreement are: 1, it contains changes or updates to the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, and the city's employee handbook. Part of those changes, what we're asking for tonight, is a revision to the longevity provisions or the provisions that grant certain incentives to employees who have been here longer. We ask not only the council approve this MOU, but also approve those changes to the personal handbook so all city employees can benefit from that change. Additionally, it also guarantees wage increases guaranteed with the CPI pursuant to economic hardship, that there is no economic hardship for the city. It also creates some small changes that guarantee that we're compliant with the IRS provisions regarding safety bonus, and that there's flexibility to focus on and look at developing a Viva account for employees down the road. So in all, we think that this is a very positive agreement, and I'm willing to answer any questions the council may have on the provisions of the agreement.
Any questions from the audience? Council?
Yeah, I just have one question.
Yes.
How many employees do we currently have that are at the 25 or the 30-year threshold or in that area?
In
the Public Works Department?
In the unit, I think there's only one employee who qualifies at the 30-year mark, and I believe there's only going to be 2 other employees during the course of this agreement that will qualify for the other provision.
Great, thanks. And you know, on that note, I think it's important for the community to understand that when your water gets turned on and your toilets get flushed and the potholes get fixed, it's the Public Works Department that's doing that.
Bravo.
And those guys, they get in some situations and work very hard in areas that a lot of us probably would not like to work sometimes. And I think it's great that we're able to get this agreement taken care of. And I think congratulations to everybody involved in that discussion. Thank you, that's all I have.
Any other comments from the council? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
And I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let the record show it was a 4-0 vote.
Bravo.
City Attorney's report.
Yeah, at your last meeting, you asked for a couple of reports. One was whether you as a board had as a council, had the ability to restructure the Recreation District Board from appointed to elected, and you do not, nor does the Board of Supervisors for their 3 appointments. The way that gets done is on a motion, either at the initiative of the board itself, to put a matter on the ballot, allowing for the reorganization to an elected board, or in response to a petition that has been circulated within the district and receives 25% of the voters to sign. Otherwise, it stays as an appointed board.
Thank you. Any comments?
Want to go to the public first?
Anybody in the audience have any comments?
Mike Bigley, Sand Canyon.
Good speaker.
Mike Bigley, Sand Canyon. So you said a petition of 25% of the people in the district. Where did you get that information from?
That's Health and Resources Code. Let me get you for the citation.
That's the state of California?
5785.3, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the audience? Council?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I only have one comment. Because of the significance of what is now on the ballot for the voters, I think the council should take a proactive position and send a formal letter to the Parks Department requesting that they evaluate the possibility of converting from an appointed board to an elected board. I think the council should preempt that and send that letter to the Tehachapi Valley Recreation and Parks District. The reason being is we are appointing people who are making decisions, financial decisions, that will significantly impact people in our community. And it's a little bit uneasy for me to have an appointment or make an appointment or participate in the process of making an appointment to somebody that ultimately, once that appointment's made, they are out of our, for no better term, our purview in how they perform. There's no way to retract that or do anything else per what Mr. Schroeder just told us. I think we need to be proactive as a council, and we need to ask the Parks Department to go ahead and evaluate and give consideration to formalize what it takes, and I'm assuming through LAFCO,
LAFCO might have a part in it at the very end, but once the voters vote to change it to an elected position, then it's going to be that way. And
Okay.
each board member runs at the next election.
Okay.
Now, you can't do that tonight, though. That's not on the agenda, so you might want to have that on a.
Well, we will definitely put that on the agenda for the next meeting and just have a very simple request made to the Parks Department. And I think what that does is it allows the city of Tehachapi to go back to our constituents and say, you know what? We see what is happening in our community, rightly or wrongly. And we understand that the decisions that we make will ultimately cost people money. And in those situations where we do that, and there's no reporting or responsibility back to us as a body, I think it's an important issue that we undertake. So I will do that, Mr. Schroeder, for the next meeting. And that's all I have.
Any other comments from the council? All right, moving on. City Attorney reports number 11.
Yeah, this gets back to the issue a few meetings ago where you wanted to join an amicus brief supporting the federal government's position in their lawsuit against the state sanctuary legislation. Those briefs are going to be filed, have to be filed by September the 25th. Those that are going to get filed will get circulated by September the 19th. All of this, you will have another meeting, not have another meeting at which to select an amicus brief. Our attorney, who's been monitoring all of this, realized that one of the briefs from the trial court was for municipalities, and it was filed by an organization in Washington, D.C. They told him that they are going to file a very similar brief on the appeal. I've attached a copy of their trial court brief. Some 7 or 8 cities from California joined in that at the trial level. And so it appeared that if there wasn't a brief that you would want to join, this would be the one, even if we had all of the other briefs laid out in front of us. This was specifically for municipalities. Now, the only caveat is that apparently one of the cities, Fountain Valley, received some blowback when they joined in that brief at the trial court, because as it turned out, the Southern Pacific Law, the Southern Poverty Law Center had labeled the underlying organization that this was the legal arm for as a hate group. I don't know what finally happened with Fountain Valley, if they withdrew their joinder of that brief or not. But I wanted to point that out to you in case any of you had an issue with that. Otherwise, I would recommend, if you want to join an amicus brief, that this is the one you join. This will be our last opportunity to do it.
Thank you. Any comments from the audience?
Council members, my name is Kathleen Murdia. I currently live in Water Canyon, but in the past I've lived in the city for many years. I'm speaking in opposition to the city joining with the Immigration Reform Institute's amicus brief. I would hope the city council would consider the contributions of both the undocumented and the documented immigrants, not only to Tehachapi, but to our community at large. As working members of our community, they do pay taxes, sales taxes. They do have taxes taken out of their payrolls from the employer where they work. They do pay into Social Security. It is an error to consider that they are a $12 billion burden on the citizens of our country. They're not eligible and don't receive Medi-Cal or food stamps. Lots of information, misinformation of the cost of the undocumented, the cost to us as citizens. On balance, they contribute to the tax base And the meaning of the sanctuary city is that we expect there's a certain level of trust and safety as they work among us and with us, beside us. It was mentioned earlier that farm workers' working conditions, many of us would not work in. And I think that's the case. That's why they're here. That's why we have food and vegetables in our stores. And on the balance, I think they give a great deal of positive input to the health and welfare of Tehachapi. I would expect that law enforcement would do their job to the extent that if there was a felon that was arrested and was undocumented, at some point they would be turned over to ICE. But I don't expect our law enforcement to do the job of ICE. In closing then, my husband is an immigrant. He came to this country as a bracero. He worked very hard. Currently, he's an American citizen. Took 40 years. He did and was an illegal or undocumented for several years, mainly because of the conditions where he worked. If any of you understand or know what it's like to live in labor camps and work and sweat in the fields, I think there'd be more, I think your perspective might be more broader in terms of how you view and the perspective you have of the undocumented. I do have neighbors. These neighbors are afraid to go to the store. It's not necessarily that there's an imminent threat, but it's the threat that they perceive because they are undocumented. And this would only intensify that perspective and how they view themselves as members of this community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, Honorable City Council, Barb Reynolds here. American Bar Association approved college law instructor for 30 years. Owner of Tehachapi Court Services 26 years. And a resident of Tehachapi for 46 years. With all due respect to my relatives who are Hispanic, to the community of the Hispanic population, I would agree with this council filing a joinder with the brief that has been discussed by the city attorney, so that the issue of jurisdiction, and that's what this whole issue is about. Who has jurisdiction? Where does the order now is created? The chaos, we need to take that out of the realm of things. Give and make it a finding of the U.S. Supreme Court that this is federal jurisdiction. Then you've got some order. Then you don't have Sacramento, you don't have San Francisco and all these other public officials that are operating outside the realm. The federal government, the federal laws are exclusive in their jurisdiction of immigration issues. And once we get that under wraps, once we stop this insanity as to who makes decisions regarding immigration, once that comes into alignment, now you can establish some civility of rules and reasonableness to accommodate my relatives and the Hispanic population, not only of Tehachapi, but of the entire state of California. So yes, I would wholeheartedly support. A joinder, which is the most cost-efficient measure to show our interest in this issue, is a joinder to be filed, fairly inexpensive to do, as our honorable city attorney will attest to, and that be done post haste, and this matter kicked down the road to some civility about this absolutely critical discussion about our relatives and the Hispanic community in California. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience?
Clint Davies, Carol Wayne. I think this is just a big waste of money. It's not our job to enforce federal law. Furthermore, by doing it, we're just basically burdening ourselves with an unfunded mandate. If the current administration in Washington wants, our local law enforcement to enforce federal laws, then they should send some money down the pipeline. So I'm against this. I think we should take that money and use it for a scholarship for one of the kids at Tashby High School. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Socorro Schmidt. I live in the city. I had hoped that this issue would have been laid to rest after a judge from the federal system said that, hey, this violates the state's rights. In other words, we have federal rights and laws, and we have state laws. Anything that is not given to the federal government belongs to the states in the way of governing itself. And so this violates the state's rights. In other words, the federal government absolutely has a right to govern the borders and to try and protect us from criminal elements and from just, well, whatever they decide to protect us from at the borders. They have their right. And they have the right to also spend the money of the 50 states to enforce those rights. I do not see why we should support something that will only increase our tax bill. In other words, get them out of the way. Get the federal people out of the way. We'll take care of this for you from state funds. The states do not have to do anything that isn't specifically noted in the Constitution, and that's in the 13th Amendment. And we recently had a judge make that finding that the state did not have to do that. And so I would remind you that we as a state also have rights. And also, for me, it's an ethical question. It's not a legal question. I'm not accustomed to biting the hand that feeds me. I fully recognize who it is that feeds me in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience?
Just a very
Yeah, I'll
quick
have
one.
one. Thanks.
Michael Bigley, Sand Canyon. If I recall, we've already hashed this over. There was a 4-0 vote to declare Tashby a non-sanctuary city. And the only thing we're voting on tonight is to whether to accept this particular amicus brief. And as far as the Southern Poverty Group, they declare everybody this Christian a hate group, so I wouldn't worry about that. They used to be a pretty good group, so I think we should move forward. I think we should accept this amicus brief. I studied the group that's doing it. There are a lot of municipalities that are going to join in with this, so that's what we're deciding tonight. We've already decided the other.
Thank you. I know. Ma'am, you already spoke. Is there something quickly you want to add?
30 seconds?
Yes.
Thank you. Two things. 7 municipalities is not a majority in the state. The other aspect is the federal government, and what is really being driven is something that I think I'm deeply concerned about. It's a culture of hate against our neighbors. And these are people that work hard and serve our needs.
Thank you. Council, any comments?
I'm Miss Missy and I live in the city. Yes, file this, please. My mother was hit by one head on, almost left her for dead. I still have my mom now, but that man is free and running free because they didn't gonna do nothing to him because he's undocumented.
Thank you. One more.
I like that sound. Pete Graf City. I think we're kind of drifting off track here. This is just to approve the amicus brief, correct? Mr. Schroeder?
It's what?
This is just to approve the amicus brief, correct? I mean, we've heard a bunch of pretty titles here, undocumented. Things that's legal to illegal. And I believe that we need to follow what our citizens want. They're wanting the safety and they want us to commit that we're here there for the citizens and safety. So I say we need to go ahead and file that and get it going here.
Thank you. Council?
I just have one very quick statement, and I agree that we have previously voted on and decided unanimously that we were going to proceed down this path. And I thank Mr. Schroeder for the research that you did. I think it's a viable solution to joining the brief that has been presented specifically for or on behalf of municipalities. That's an easy avenue for us. But we have an obligation to our constituents, the law-abiding citizens in our community, to join this effort. And that's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
I have to agree with that. The law is the law, and in the Constitution it states that the federal government will protect its citizens. And there's a certain divide line between state law and federal oversight. and the fact that we're doing ICE's job, I don't think so. We're actually impeding ICE's job. So I'm all about sending the brief.
No? All right, does anyone want to make a motion concerning this?
Yeah, sure. I'll make the motion that we proceed with the brief as described by Mr. Schroeder to adjoin for or into the specific brief associated with the municipalities.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm not gonna oppose, but I am gonna abstain because I think this is a lot bigger than just distribute to Hatchby. And I think this, like Mr. Reynolds said, this is something that we need to decide at the federal and state level. We have a lot of folks on both sides of this issue in our community, especially in my district. And I just want a fair outcome for both sides. And this brief, I think it will, it's not going to make any difference, but I'm going to abstain on this vote tonight.
Thank you. Let the record show that was 3 yes and 1 abstain. All right, council member reports. Mr. Wallstrom.
I have none, thank you.
Mr. Smith? No. Mr. Hipke?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have one question maybe to Mr. Schlosser. Do you have an estimation of the number of parking spaces that will be provided to the new facility for Whirlwind at the old hardware store? This specifically arose out of a discussion and a concern that the new parking facility across the street will be used or could potentially be used or used up by employees rather than commuters. And maybe we have somebody in the audience that could answer the question on the number of parking spaces that we have allocated for the business, or will that overflow into the parking lot across the street? And if it does, will it be restricted to non-commuter hours only? The folks that commute out of Tehachapi, some of those folks leave at 4 o'clock in the morning. So that was just a question that was asked of me by one of my constituents, and I'm not clear on the answer.
Sure. There were a lot of questions in there, so forgive me if I missed one. The first answer is 101 parking spaces is the number associated with that. Secondly, I would point out that as this council is aware, and you are too, Mr. Headkey, this project started long before World Wind Solar moved or purchased the property associated with Ace Hardware, so there's no connection between the construction of that.
I hope I didn't imply that there was a connection, but it was.
That's what I heard, sorry.
Okay, well, that was not what was meant to be implied, and I apologize if it was.
Okay.
The question is, if we are taking state monies to put in a commuter parking area in our downtown area, will that be reserved for commuters to use, or will it be cross-utilized by other businesses in that particular area? And I know parking has always been a contentious issue downtown. And, if we're gonna bring people out of the Albertsons parking lot, we're gonna bring people from behind Kmart, this facility that we're building could fill up very fast.
It's a valid question on that note. I would say this, the intent is that it will be public parking. So public parking comes with the rules and regulations listed in the municipal code as it relates to them. I don't believe overnight parking is allowed in public parking locations. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and we don't have to address that issue from a policing perspective. But if the concern, for instance, is that vehicles associated with a business, any business in that area, were to plan on parking their fleet of vehicles in that overnight, that would be addressed as part of the municipal code. But otherwise, it's public parking, which means that if you are visiting that business or you're coming in for a couple hours and there's a spot available, it's public parking. Ultimately, if it becomes an issue in terms of not being viable for commuter purposes, then we would probably come back to the council and ask to modify the municipal code or to post signs and modify the parking hours associated with that to achieve the goal. I think the answer is this, the intent is commuter traffic. I expect that there will be some non-commuter traffic that utilizes that parking lot. That said, if no overnight parking is allowed, and these commuters are all getting there and filling that thing up by 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, then that's gonna kind of work itself out. The commuters are gonna end up kind of winning that war, because they're gonna get there before that local business opens at 10 o'clock later that morning. So, my expectation is it's not going to be a major problem. We did a recent parking analysis that was presented to the Planning Commission that showed that the downtown area as a whole was largely overparked, meaning we have many more parking spaces currently in the downtown than we need for the businesses that are currently there. That analysis included those anticipated 100 spots, but the overall for the city was somewhere around like plus 400 parking spaces. Now, in the downtown core, those individual blocks are a little minus, but a couple blocks out of that, you start to get a collective amount of parking that works really well for downtown. So my expectation is it's going to go smoothly. If it doesn't, we're going to let you know. And if your constituents bring you an issue on that front, then that's what I need to know for feedback so I can try to adjust.
Yeah, great, thanks. And just, as a final comment, we sold this to our community as a commuter parking lot. It's a commuter facility that's going to have buses, bus lanes, some of the other things that are typically associated with a commuter-based facility. So the question was presented, and I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ms. Mayor, I don't have anything further.
Thank you.
One comment. Thank you, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem. The issue of the parking lot, I've heard various comments concerning the construction, the outbuilding of this particular building to accommodate Whirlwind. In addition, a voc ed school program that will attach itself to that. I've taught voc ed for 10 years. And I know the students, and of course, the entire program is driven by the number of bodies that keep the seats warm. So there's going to be an ongoing issue of that parking lot filling up because there just isn't any parking around there. How will you address that issue at that time? Because that certainly is going to cut into the number of available parking spaces for the underlying purpose for which the parking lot was built and intended to be occupied.
Jay?
I would just like to add a couple comments. The city of Tehachapi is intent on promoting downtown businesses, and we welcome investment. Anybody that's willing to buy an old dilapidated building that quite frankly is a tear down and spend maybe millions of dollars upgrading it, like Worldwind Solar is doing, and others are doing, Cliff Meredith, Australia, so on and so forth. We appreciate that investment. We also understand that downtown parking is at a premium. That's why we have purchased and or leased many properties for parking lots or transit centers. The one we're talking about now, 101, which is a transit center and a downtown parking. Make no mistake, it's downtown parking. The VFW, Conan's, none of those, Mr. Haddad's smog repair, they really don't have enough parking. But that's because downtown was designed and built 100 years ago, right? And we're in this world. So we have the one we're talking about now. We have the visitor center. We have the parking lot that is adjacent to Las Palmas. We have the corner of Robinson and F Street. We have the parking lot between Southern Shooters and H&R Block. You know, and the list goes on and on and on. So whenever we have the opportunity to purchase a property, enhance it, develop it, so that we can continue the investment in downtown. Because people, you go to Kmart, you'll park 150 yards out and not think about it. But if you can't park in front of the business in downtown, people have a problem with that. And I don't know what it is, but we're certainly trying to enhance that business model. So we appreciate all the comments, but we do our best to enhance and promote investment in our entire town, including downtown. So I think this is just yet another example of a win-win.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Nikki Cummings, resident of the unincorporated district, business owner and property owner in Tehachapi, owner and president of World Wind and Solar. Our plan, Mr. Headkey, is not to keep overnight vehicles. We're still going to maintain our residence on the other end of the city, in the city limits at 915 Tehachapi Willow Springs Road. And so that shouldn't be a problem. It is, however, a public parking lot, and I'm sure that you will see my trucks in there from time to time during the day. And it's a public parking lot, and if there's space available, we may be there during the day. We're not a vocational education company, contrary to what was said. That was a wrong statement. Nobody pays us for training. We pay our employees, we train them. We put good men and good women, over 154 good men and women in this area to work in Tehachapi and across the country, totaling 370 employees across the country. So we're proud of the investment that we've made in this town. We took a building that should have been a tear down. We invested the money to restore the oldest commercial building that still stands in Tehachapi today. It's over 108 years old, and it was a big investment. We're very proud of that. So there won't be any overnight parking that I'm aware of. And Mayor Wiggins, Pro Tem Wiggins, and Mr. Smith have my cell phone number. They can call me whenever they want. They can call Worldwind. And Mr. Wallstrom, Mr. Headkey, I implore you guys to reach out to us if you ever have any questions. We're very available. We think of ourselves as great partners with the city of Tehachapi and the community. And so if you ever want to come out and see our facility, tour either of our campuses, see our new beautiful building that we're very proud of, we welcome you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Excuse me, Ms. Cummings. Could you come back up, please? Through the chair, please.
Yes.
Could you tell me how many parking spaces you currently have between, I guess it's the liquor store and your entranceway? Do you know what that number is?
Sure, that's an entire separate parcel in addition to the building. Jay, do you remember, was it 20?
Something in that
Somewhere around 20, not including the parking availability on Poly and the parking space, space, not spaces, in front of Tehachapi Boulevard.
Okay, and did you, in your purchase, acquire the lot that's directly to the west of you on the other side of Poly?
We have not.
Hang on a second. Do we know who the owner of that lot is?
We do, and I believe it is sold. Did it sell?
No, the last I heard somebody was in escrow for it.
Yeah, it may be an escrow.
Is that ultimately going to be parking also, or is it?
It is not in our plan to purchase it for parking.
Okay. Will you have additional parking on the back of the building, where the old where the drive-through lumber area was?
No, we're incorporating that space,
Okay.
we're enclosing it, but, we have talked with Jay about the possibility of, what is the striping, like, what's it called when you do the angled striping?
Diagonal?
Is it just diagonal striping? I don't know if there's any
Sure.
special
Angled
term.
parking.
Okay, so angled parking, thank you, similar to what's on Green Street, to create a few extra spaces if you need.
Okay, and then, I don't think, the concern that was presented to me had anything to do with overnight parking, actually.
Okay.
It wasn't, that didn't even come up. However, an overnight situation could potentially lead into an early morning hours, tying up of a spot, for a commuter that's leaving town early.
That's the only scenario I consider to be a problem for the commuter
Okay.
parking lot, because if the car's not there by the time somebody commutes to work, then the commuter will have that spot.
Yeah.
And it's first come, first served in public parking, so the only concern, I'm sorry, I should have told you, that's my thought process, is the only concern is somebody overnight parking and consuming that spot for when the commuter shows up. But if you're commuting at 10:30 in the morning and you can't get a commuter spot, sorry, doesn't meet my definition of a commuter.
Yeah, we don't have, I
Yeah.
appreciate your humor in that, but we don't really have a lot of people commuting out of town at 10 o'clock in the morning.
That's kind of.
So it's, it's either dark 30 or it's not.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Ms. Knox.
You're welcome. And just so you know, our hours are around the clock here. We do work different hours, but at the corporate headquarters, we plan on starting at 7 a.m.
Okay, super, thank you.
Thank you, and I would like to thank the Cummings for their investment in downtown. I'd like to thank staff for constantly working to try and bring more things to the downtown area. It's 108 years old, and somebody's gonna use it. What could be better than that? And if that commuter parking lot had not been started across the street, perhaps this would not even be a question. But thank you, everyone, and with that, we're adjourned.